All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us to our first College Success Workshop of Spring 2022. We are so happy that you're here and that you made it. We're excited to see what today's workshop brings you. And we have our lovely presenter here, Dr. Ashley Erickson, who is doing a presentation on planning or making a 5-year plan. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and extend the screen share to Dr. Ashley Erickson. Thank you.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. It's great to see some familiar faces as well as some unfamiliar faces, and I hope that you will all get a lot out of this session today. So just a heads up, our goal here is to help you develop your very own 5-year plan. And so to help everyone, I have put together this template in a Google Doc. So if you haven't already, please take a moment to click on the link in the Zoom chat and download a copy of this template in your preferred format. We're going to follow all 3 parts of this template today as we complete the workshop. And please don't panic if you find that you're unable to finish filling out the template. You'll find that setting goals is sometimes very challenging and it can take time. And so if you don't finish the entire template, that's perfectly okay. The goal here is to get you started and to give you some ideas. And I encourage you to go back and think about this even further, because you'll find the more time you spend setting good goals and planning, the higher your chances are for success. All right, so just in case, I'll put the link in our chat one more time and we'll get started. Okay, so once again, today we are here to talk about how and why to make a 5-year plan. So my name is Ashley Erickson. I'm an assistant professor here in the Department of Engineering at Diablo Valley College. And so once again, the goals for today are first to know how and why to make a 5-year plan. Why bother, right? Then we're going to talk about how to write SMART goals and break these goals down into doable step-by-step milestones. And then as we go, please do remember to complete that 5-year plan template. I stuck the link in the chat one more time. So the goal here is to really set yourself up for success. And finally, at the end, we'll try to save some time for questions and also review some additional tips and things to consider. And please do make sure, especially if you're here for extra credit, make sure you stick around until the end of the session. Zyra is going to be sending out an extra credit survey for everyone, or an attendance survey for everyone. So please do make sure you take a moment to fill that out as well. All right, so without further ado, let me just briefly introduce myself so you know who I am. My name is Ashley Erickson. I'm a Bay Area native. I'm a foodie. I like all things nerdy. My background is in chemical engineering. So I did my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in chemical engineering. And along the way, I also worked on biosensors, optics, process engineering, manufacturing, all sorts of stuff. And I worked in engineering industry about 6 years before coming and becoming a professor here at DVC. And so I like to share this picture here of me at my very first day as an engineer. I remember the day this picture was taken, and I remember being terrified and thinking, wow, I finally finished my degree. Here I am being a real engineer. And I remember as a student, I kept on thinking, wow, it'll be so amazing when this day comes. Everything is going to be amazing and wonderful. But really, I'd like to share a little bit more about what was going through my head that day. First, You can't tell in this picture, but this was in Arizona in July, and it was really hot. It was probably like 110, 115 degrees out in that picture. But it was freezing cold at work, so hence the long sleeves. But the bigger point was kind of these 2 points here. I was overwhelmed and terrified. It finally sunk in that getting an engineering degree did not automatically make me happy and successful. And so I entered the real world on day one, wondering, what do I do now? How do I set myself up for success, both in work and in life? And I was disappointed because nobody ever taught me how to do this in school. And I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And so I'm really glad everybody's here today because I can share a little bit of what I learned and hopefully help you both now and when you're in that position of being in the real world. And so that brings us to our next point here. Here's what I learned. I learned that I needed to make a 5-year plan. I learned that making a 5-year plan is actually a really powerful tool. Career coaches, career advisors, and lots of successful people recommend planning out your next 5 years. This is how you set yourself up for success, both when you're a student and even after, when you're in the real world. And I was really surprised to learn that, many people struggle to achieve their goals because either you don't know what you want, right? You don't know, or because you don't have a plan. I think all of us have been in those situations when we're kind of not sure what we want, or we know what we want, but we just don't quite know how to get there. And then there's also some interesting research. You can read about it in the link, that you're actually 42% more likely to achieve a goal if you write it down, and even more likely if you actually remind yourself of these goals on a regular basis. So that brings us to today's session. Why make a 5-year plan? A 5-year plan is a collection of goals and plans for the next 5 years. And so, as I mentioned, this is something that is widely used in the real world. You'll find many successful people, successful mentors and mentees, career coaches, professionals. Many people use these. I used a 5-year plan, and I found it helped me tremendously. So my goal for today is to help you get started with yours. Just in case anybody missed our Google Forms link, I'll stick it in the chat one last time. And so what we'll do in today's workshop is we're going to go through the 3 parts of this 5-year plan template. What we'll do is we'll go through each part little by little, and we'll talk through it and answer questions, and then move on to the next part. We'll also learn how to write more effective goals. So not just things like, I want to eat healthier or I want to study harder, but actual powerful goals that will help us achieve our 5-year plan. All right, so one last note before we dive in. Please note that the first time I made a 5-year plan, I spent a very long time on it. I probably spent a whole weekend kind of brainstorming mine. So it might take you longer than 1 hour and longer than this session to fully complete the plan. So please remember, you do not have to have everything figured out today. I encourage you to use this workshop to get started. And the slides and the Zoom recording, all of this will be made available to you after the session. All right, any questions before we move on? All right. So with that, let's go ahead and look at part 1 of our 5-year plan template. And you'll see that part 1 of the plan looks something like this. So Part 1 is about looking back and looking forward. And the idea here is that you think about how far you've come and where you want to go. And so you'll notice I've listed a bunch of categories on the left-hand side. And then what you want to do is give yourself a score from 0 to 10. 10 being perfect, you wouldn't change anything. 0 being really, really bad, and everywhere else in between. The idea here is to think about how you've improved and what you'd like to continue to do. And then you can also write a few notes to yourself describing what you might want to do or change. For example, with education, maybe 5 years ago you were still in high school and you gave yourself, a 5 out of 10. Maybe today, now that you're at DVC, you're making some progress. Maybe you have a 6 or a 7. And maybe in 5 years, you want to finish your degree. Maybe you want to have a 9 or a 10. So you could make a note to yourself like, I want to complete my degree or my engineering degree, whatever degree you might be working on. So the goal here is not to make you feel bad, especially if 5 years ago, maybe things were not as perfect as you want, but just to think about how have you improved and how would you like to continue to improve? So another good example is, like career. Maybe some of us, maybe we don't have any work experience 5 years ago, and that's okay. Maybe we're just starting out, we give ourselves kind of a lower score today. We might be working part-time, don't really enjoy our job that much. But 5 years from now, we might have our degree finished. We might be out working in a better situation. Maybe you'll have a 7 or an 8 or even a 10. And so the idea here is to fill in this table and think about where would you like to be in 5 years? All right. So with that, please take a moment or two to work on part 1. Remember, you don't have to finish it all during this workshop. And while everybody's kind of taking a look at part 1, I'll pause for a moment and see if there's any questions. Anybody have questions on part 1? Want to shout out, type in the chat?
So like a 0 would mean then like that you made no progress at all, say?
Yeah, so you're just rating yourself. Like if you have like 0 education or 0 work experience, or maybe you're just not particularly happy with your current situation, then you'd give yourself a lower score. And 10 would be everything is perfect and wonderful, and I don't want to change a thing.
Oh, okay.
And again, the goal here is not necessarily to spend forever on this, worrying about what number you give. This is just to help you think of ideas and think about, okay, where do I most want to improve? The other advantage of this activity is it might help you prioritize. Like maybe you happen to be doing okay in your family or okay in your education, but you really want to prioritize maybe growing your career. Or maybe you realize that you need to take care of yourself and you really want to prioritize your health. So some of this is also just to help you think about all different goals, not just school. All right. So again, you don't have to entirely complete part 1. The idea is to help you just start thinking about where you would like to go and what you would like to improve. Any questions before we move on to part 2?
Just for curiosity, what are your plans in terms of education now that you went to grad school and finished your schooling?
That's a great question. And honestly, I would say that I would still rate myself probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I feel like you can always keep learning. And there's still more stuff I want to learn. You know, I want to learn to be a better instructor. I want to improve my own skills and my own knowledge. So I feel like it kind of depends on you personally, but you know, depending on what you feel is the ideal case for you, that's what you'd want to gauge yourself against.
Thanks. That's very helpful, especially for the future within 5 years.
For sure. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to part 2. Once again, if you have not fully completed part 1, if you're not sure about some of this, that's okay. Remember, these goals are not completely set in stone, and you still have every right to adjust them later as needed. So let's go ahead and continue on to part 2 of this plan. The idea with part 2 is to take the ideas that you wrote down in part 1 and turn them into goals. And so that brings us to this next point about SMART goals. And so it's very important when we set goals to make sure that we have a very clear plan and to make sure we know exactly what it is we want to achieve. And so this acronym, SMART, is very commonly used to help write effective goals. Notice what the acronym stands for. S is for specific. Your goal should be very specific. For example, if I say I want to eat healthier, if I want to eat healthier, well, that's not very specific. What does healthier mean? Some people might have different definitions of healthy than others. So the idea with specific is you're very clear about what it is. For example, with this SMART goal, I'm saying I will eat at least 2 servings of fresh vegetables every day for the next year. That's a lot more specific, right? Because healthy means 2 servings of fresh vegetables every day. Maybe that's not the only definition of healthy, but it's a lot more specific than just saying, I want to eat healthier. So this is not SMART. Also, SMART goals are measurable. So it's very easy to see whether or not you've achieved the goal. So in the case of the vegetables, did you eat 2 servings? If you ate your 2 servings of vegetables, you're good to go. But if you're just trying to eat healthier, well, you don't know what healthier means. How do you know whether you've met healthier? Next one is achievable. So I have a big sweet tooth. I'm not very good at eating healthy all the time. So if my SMART goal was to eat only fresh vegetables every day for the year, that wouldn't necessarily be achievable for me. And so you want to make sure that these goals you set are actually doable and you're not being too unrealistic with yourself. So 2 servings of fresh vegetables per day, hopefully that's doable. Maybe that's doable if I really work at it. So that's the idea. You want to make sure your goals are also achievable. Relevant is important too, right? You want to make sure that this goal is actually helping you along your 5-year plan and helping you in the direction you want to go. What if I already ate 10 servings of fresh vegetables every day? Eating 2 more servings wouldn't necessarily help me be that much healthier. So you want to make sure that this goal is also relevant to what you're trying to do. And lastly, you want your goals to be time-bound. That means they have a time limit. If we look back at I want to eat healthier, well, when? For how long, right? Notice here I say every day for the next year. That's pretty specific. So I have a time limit. I better get my 2 servings of vegetables within the next day, or else I won't have hit my goal. Questions on SMART goals? All right. So let's just talk through a couple more examples so that you can see what I mean by a SMART goal. So on the left here, this is an okay-ish goal, right? Not a bad goal, but it could be better. On the right-hand side is a SMART goal. So for example, I want to manage my time better. Well, that's a good goal to have. But how about this? Every Sunday evening, I will spend 20 minutes making a plan for next week. And I will schedule time to complete all my work, assignments, and tasks. Which goal do you think is more effective? Like, this SMART goal will be a lot more powerful. And it's a lot more easy to tell if you are indeed achieving that goal. So let's go ahead and look at a couple more examples. I want to get more exercise. That's also a good goal. How about every morning I'll spend 30 minutes doing one of those things? I want to improve my grades. That's an important one. Well, every day after lecture, I will spend 30 minutes reviewing the lecture material and follow up with the instructor about any questions I have. That's a bit more powerful than just improve my grades. Finally, I want to get a degree in engineering, or maybe something else. That's good. How about within the next 5 years, I will complete a BS in mechanical engineering and maintain a minimum 3.0 GPA. That's a challenging goal, but it's also very specific. It's a SMART goal. Questions on these examples? All right. So let's return to part 2. And you'll see in part 2 of our 5-year plan template, I've listed a table for you. And you'll see the table has different types of goals, like education, career, family, fun and adventure. There's all sorts of categories. And based on part 1, and where you'd like to improve, write some goals. So for example, if you wanted to improve your career or your education, maybe you wanted to do that mechanical engineering degree. So write a SMART goal here. And then once you've decided on that SMART goal, add some milestones. So these milestones are basically checkpoints. These are ways of checking whether you've made progress on your goal. They could also be good points to celebrate your progress if you're on the right track. So for example, a 1-year milestone for getting an engineering degree might be to meet with your DVC advisor and map out an academic plan. Maybe you also want to check whether you've maintained the GPA that you're aiming for. Maybe within 3 years, your goal would be to transfer from DVC to a 4-year school. And then finally, maybe your 5th-year milestone might be to actually have graduated that degree. Or maybe you have achieved a percentage completion of that degree. Questions on goals or milestones?
So we could fill it out from either direction, from the 1 year towards the 5 years.
Yeah, good point. So if you're not sure about how to break a task into milestones, you can also work backwards. So if you're not sure where to start, work backwards if needed. So if you know you'd like to have your degree finished in 5 years from now, that's great. You can put that as your 5-year milestone. But then you can work backwards and ask yourself, okay, if I want to have my degree done in 5 years, what do I need to have at the 3-year mark? Do I need to have transferred? Or maybe do I need to have taken certain courses? Or maybe do I need to, enroll in a certain class? Have I needed to complete a certain class? And then going backwards from there, you can figure out, well, then what would my 1-year milestones be? How can I confirm a year from now that I'm on my way and that I'm making progress? All right, so I know we don't have a ton of time here, and it can take a lot of time to write SMART goals. So let's just pause for a few minutes, let everybody start writing some SMART goals. And while we do that, I can answer some questions, or if anyone has a SMART goal to share or needs help creating one, then we can discuss it.
Okay, so for example, for my education, for 1 year, I would say I'll only have had A's or B's in all classes I've taken and be transferred to a 4-year university. And third 3-year, acquire a BS degree in engineering, have graduated and be in an engineering job, and like kind of iffy about like a 5-year, because a graduate degree would be 2 years, right? But I'm not sure if I'd want a graduate degree like that soon after, or like to continue. This is about 5 years milestones, which should kind of, you say, should be the most solid part of our plans.
Yeah, and I think that's a great start. And remember,
Okay.
you don't have to have everything 100% set in stone. Maybe you're interested in a graduate degree. Maybe you'll decide that you like your job, you just want to keep working full time. But maybe you put in your plan that you'd like to decide whether the graduate degree is the right thing. Or maybe you want to, even in your 1-year milestone, maybe you do a little bit more research and make that decision before you hit the 5-year mark. But yeah, that's a great point, is you definitely don't have to have, everything figured out. But that's why it's good to look at the whole picture. Let's see, there's a question. Would wanting an internship fit in a 3-year milestone? Sure. Like, suppose you want to get experience in an area so that you can land a full-time job. Like, landing an internship would be a great milestone. Another kind of more concrete skill, in case you don't get an internship, maybe your goal would be to complete certain coursework or to develop certain skills that would qualify you for an internship. So just in case the internship doesn't happen, you still have a way of measuring that you have achieved those skills and that preparation.
So, for example, a 1-year milestone could be confident enough in a programming language to add it to a resume.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we'll see in just a moment when we go on to part 3. That's actually one of the steps that I recommend you take, is look at those dream jobs. Look at that dream job you're shooting for. Take a look at all the skills that the employers want for that dream job and figure out how you can learn those. Maybe there's a course at DVC. Maybe there's a club or an internship. That's how you can sort of work backwards and reverse engineer your way to your goals. All right, so why don't we go ahead and move on to part 3. I know there's a lot here, and it definitely takes a lot of time to write down these goals. So please don't panic if you're still thinking about them, maybe still not sure of them. The goal here is to get you started with this plan so that you can continue to fill it out and continue to figure out your goals. The last thing I'd like to emphasize is make sure you keep your goals SMART. That maximizes your chances for success. All right, so let's move on to part 3. And part 3 is taking action. So you just decided on a really nice list of goals. And this is the most important part. Everybody can say they have a goal, but the thing to do is to break your goals down into manageable pieces. So you'll see in part 3, we have this table where you have your goal. So for example, maybe your goal for education, you wanted to get that degree, right? So you have your education goal. And then you ask yourself, what can I do right now to help me reach that education goal? Maybe I need to book an appointment with an advisor at DVC. Maybe I should meet with some experts who know more about the career path I'm interested in. Now, what can you do right now to put yourself in the right direction? Next column is what can you do every day to help reach your goals? This is where you want to start thinking about those SMART goals again. What can you do every day to help you reach your goals? Similarly, what can you do every week? So notice we're kind of zooming out a little bit. What can you do every week to make sure you're on track with that education goal? And then finally, we go all the way out to every month. So the idea here is you look at all the different goals you might have and you break them down into manageable pieces. Because, anyone can say they want to get a degree or, land a new job. That's really hard. It's really hard to do that. But if you break it down into these smaller pieces, it becomes a lot more attainable. Let's look at a couple examples of this. So these examples are on your handout as well. But you'll see that this is just an example for education. But you can use a similar approach for other goals you might have as well. For example, education. Suppose you want to get that degree in mechanical engineering. So, we have your goal listed here. What can you do right now? Well, maybe right now I'm going to book that appointment with my academic advisor. Maybe I'm going to identify friends, family members, or mentors who can help me stay on track. Maybe I should search for jobs online, find my dream job, and make a list of all the skills I want to develop so that I could be a good candidate for that dream job. Notice a lot of these things we can do right now. And we can take what we learn and use it to help us power forward. And then there's some examples for every day as well. So every day, ensure all tasks on my plan are completed. Or maybe if you can't do all of them, how about 80%, 90%? Try to keep improving. Another example, immediately after every lecture, spend 30 minutes reviewing my notes and digesting the material. That's shown to improve retention of the knowledge. I really like this last goal. If you're trying to improve mindset, how about spending 15 minutes writing in a journal? 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you've learned, and 3 new ideas that you'd like to think about. Here's some examples for every week. How about every week spending 20 minutes planning out the next week and allocating time to complete all the tasks that you want to complete? Another big one is making sure you schedule enough study time so that you can be successful in your classes. Finally, every month. So maybe you look back at that list of skills that you developed, and maybe you take an online class or watch a video to learn more about one of those skills that you're interested in. Maybe you try to connect with one more student or professional in your area of interest. Maybe you just check in on your goals, see how you're doing, see where you need to make adjustments. See how breaking goals into smaller pieces can really help here? It makes this larger goal seem a lot less scary when you break it down into more manageable pieces. So let's go ahead and pause for a moment here and let everybody think for a moment about some SMART goals, which will help you complete those larger goals. Think about SMART goals for what you could do right now, or every day, or every week to help you with your goals. While we pause, are there any questions or comments from the group so far? All right, I see thumbs up. So I know this is a lot to think about. So please remember, you do not have to have all of this figured out within the next hour. This is a process. And I encourage you to take some time to really think about this. This is the next 5 years. 5 years from now, I hope you'll look back and say, boy, I'm glad I put together that 5-year plan. It really helped me achieve a lot of my goals. Another thing to think about is that there's no guarantee that you'll always be 100% on top of every single goal. You don't want to beat yourself up if accidentally you slip. But try to be consistent, If you can at least achieve your goals 70, 80% of the time, even 90% of the time, that's still a heck of a lot better than 0% of the time. All right. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this session with a few more things to consider as you work on your goals. I get a lot of questions from students, so I tried to put together a few pieces of advice that are helpful when thinking about your goals. So first bit of advice, plan your classes carefully. Many students don't realize that there is an actual definition. 1 unit of college class requires approximately 3 hours of work per week. So this could be lecture time, lab time, homework time, but the general rule of thumb. So that means if you're taking a 4-unit class, you should budget about 12 hours per week for that one class. So keep your plans realistic. A lot of students fall into the trap where they're trying to graduate as quick as they can, and they end up overloading themselves. So be mindful of this rule of thumb as you're setting up your class schedules. I also recommend establishing a regular routine and making sure you schedule recovery time and fun time. I personally have a lot of trouble taking breaks. But if I intentionally put time on my calendar and say, okay, this is break time, I'm going to go outside and take a walk, or I'm going to go just take my eyes off the computer, get some fresh air. If you schedule that recovery time, you'll feel a lot less guilty about taking it. And then you'll be able to come back refreshed and able to focus on your tasks. All right. How about the second point? Be patient and flexible. This is really tough. I remember when I started that first engineering job, I was absolutely useless for basically the first 6 months because you're ramping up, you're learning, you're growing, you're learning the ropes on the job. Maybe I wasn't completely useless. I'm being too hard on myself, but I felt that way. I wanted to dive in and be able to solve all the problems instantly. But progress can take time. And so I'd remind you that it's better to plan and proceed slowly than to rush, overload yourself, and burn out. Also, give yourself permission to adjust your goals. Maybe you're not going to achieve all the goals on your plan, but even trying and failing might help lead you to new opportunities. Also, consider prioritizing your goals. I think many of us start these 5-year plans and we have a lot we want to accomplish. But I encourage you to think about, what goal would you be willing to give up in order to achieve all of the others? That way, if you have too much on your plate, you can't achieve everything, get rid of one, but then at least maybe you can achieve the others. Again, just a quick example of this about flexibility. I originally wanted to work in biotech, making pharmaceuticals. And so I was a biomedical engineering major. At one point I was pre-med. Then I realized chemical engineers were more qualified to do what I wanted to do. Then I got into manufacturing and realized that these roles were pretty fast-paced. They were demanding jobs. They didn't give me very good work-life balance. And I kept gravitating towards teaching, finally ended up in a teaching role. So you got to be flexible. You might find out what you originally want isn't what you actually want, and that's okay. Next point, remember to take care of yourself. Don't forget about all the other stuff besides school. I can't emphasize enough that recovery time is really key. We can't just work 100% of the time. So schedule time for yourself as well. Fourth point, finding your ideal job is a process. Most people do not land their ideal job straight out of college. You work towards it. You figure out what that is. And there's this neat figure that I found about ikigai, this Japanese term for basically like perfect harmony. And the idea is that your ideal job is kind of at the intersection of what you're good at, what you enjoy, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. So if you try to gravitate towards that spot, then hopefully you'll be in good shape. Also, your major isn't permanent. So just because you majored in one thing, that won't stop you from learning and doing another. So just to give you a personal example, I was a chemical engineering student, but I worked in all sorts of stuff in engineering. I did optics, I did manufacturing, I worked on hardware, and eventually even went into teaching. And so just because I was a chemical engineer, that didn't stop me from doing other stuff as well. So I know that Zaira wanted to give a quick poll for everybody. So maybe Zaira, should we just pause for a moment here and we could send out the survey and then we'll wrap up with the rest of these points?
Awesome, definitely. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the survey in the chat real quick. And again, this is an evaluation survey just to help any presenters with how to maybe improve their workshops for the future, and also a way for us to gather information so that we can send it to your professors. So please make sure to fill it out. Make sure to put the professor's information, so their name, the name of the course that you're trying to get this extra credit for, and their email address. If you do not know their name or email address, it's okay to put the name of the course and the section, and I'll look for it and I'll make sure to tell the professor that you came here for extra credit, okay? If you happen to have any problem with the evaluation link or anything, please be sure to chat me and I'll try to figure out what else we can do. And with that, we're gonna give y'all approximately 2 minutes to fill out the form, and then Dr. Erickson could wrap up the session.
All right, thanks a lot, Zaira. And yes, everyone, please do take a moment to fill that survey out. You don't want to miss out on your extra credit if you're here for that. And the feedback really does help. So please do fill out this survey. It helps us put on more workshops like this, because our goal really is to make them as useful as possible to everybody.
The title of this workshop is 5-year goal or planning? What do we call it?
So the official title of the workshop that we have is Planning for Success, How and Why to Make a 5-Year Plan. I'll go ahead and put that on the chat.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll pause a minute or two longer just to let everybody fill that out, and then we'll wrap up our last few points here. All right. Why don't we go ahead and continue? And again, this recording will be posted. So those of you who maybe aren't quite done with the survey, please do just continue filling it out. And Zyra will make this recording available later on after the session.
Yes.
So
Oh,
that brings
sorry.
us, oh, yes, go ahead, Zyra.
Let me just add one last thing. Yeah, it is going to be available through our YouTube channel, First Year Experience YouTube channel, and I will make sure to add that link to the chat so y'all can even look at the workshops that we had last semester. And yeah, so you can go ahead, Dr. Erickson.
All right, thanks everyone. Okay, so our sixth point, think about the type of work which suits you best. I remember when I first started writing goals, I didn't really think about this stuff. And so I'm not going to expect you to read and memorize all these questions here, but these are really good questions to ask yourself. Do you want to be a people manager? Or do you want to work on your own? Do you want to do research? Do you like to work with a team or do you prefer by yourself? Do you want to build stuff or crunch numbers? Do you want to sit in an office or work in a factory? Use your hands? You know, are you introverted, extroverted? Do you want to work with customers? Do you like a fast-paced environment or do you prefer a slow pace? You know, how independently do you want to work? Do you want to do travel? And this is a big one. How much ambiguity do you like? Do you like working with the unknown? Or do you want to have a very clear plan and a set path? Do you want a regular 8-to-5 job? Or do you want more flexibility? And how much work-life balance do you want? Do you want to be able to work from home? Or do you want to be able to be in the office every day? These are really important questions to think about. And you don't have to know the answer to all of them right now. But if you have strong opinions about some of these, it's definitely worth thinking about. Another point, get experience. You know, it can be intimidating when you're starting out, especially in fields like engineering or STEM, where maybe it's hard to get that first role in the lab or in the internship. So I'd encourage you to join clubs and extracurricular groups. There's a lot of clubs at DVC and a lot of other groups that you could potentially join to get some related experience. So really, experience on teams and clubs and volunteering, even your own personal projects. This is really good evidence to employers that you have developed your skills, especially teamwork, communication, and interpersonal skills. Next one, networking. So take advantage of opportunities to get to know your professors, classmates, and people in the industry. And people you know might be able to connect you to opportunities. And there's also professional organizations that might be of interest. Ninth point here, look at where the industry is headed. So the National Academy of Engineering actually has a list of 14 grand challenges that engineers need to solve. So if you're not quite sure where the industry is heading, you can also look at these grand challenges. Again, these slides will be available later, so you don't have to write these all down now, but it's something to think about. these are big problems that smart people need to look at and solve. And so if these look interesting to you, then by all means, explore them further. And finally, the last point I'd like to leave everyone with is to consider a graduate degree. I know many students are very focused on finishing the associate's or undergraduate, but I also found that many students don't know about graduate degrees. And so I'd like to just share a little bit more information here. So note that the time required to get a degree can vary greatly depending on whether you're a full-time student or whether you're working. So, please take these numbers as estimates, assuming that you're a full-time student. So if you're working, the time to achieve the degree can be longer. So bachelor's degrees typically 4 to 5 years. Master's degree requires a bachelor's plus usually 1 to 2 more years of full-time coursework. And the interesting thing is PhDs. So a PhD requires a bachelor's degree plus about 4 to 6 more years of school. However, in STEM fields, a professor will pay you a salary and you get free tuition. So for example, I got my master's and PhD for free from USC because my PhD was funded by fellowships, teaching assistantships, and research assistantships. So it's something to consider. If you really like research, you really enjoy a particular area, you might want to consider the PhD route. It's not for everyone because you have to really be able to do a lot of research, but it could be a really good option if it's something you're interested in. Another thing to note about graduate degrees, they qualify you for a higher salary and higher level jobs. So, you can get paid more and have more seniority. But one thing to know about is that more senior jobs also generally require more working hours. So if you are a senior engineer, principal engineer at a company, you're often expected to work longer and harder than less senior colleagues. So everybody has a balance, and I encourage you to think about where your balance is. If you want to make a ton of money and work really, really hard, maybe a graduate degree could be interesting and helpful to you. Other people are perfectly happy getting an associate's or bachelor's and working a regular job, not having to work quite as many hours. So at the end of the day, it depends on you and your preference. All right, so I did want to make sure we wrapped up with a few more minutes left for questions. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming and just briefly summarize here. First point is that a 5-year plan really is powerful. 5 years can seem so far off, but really, if you want to be in a better place in 5 years, one of the best ways to set yourself up for success is to make that 5-year plan. And I really hope that that template and the ideas in these slides will help you get started. Also, write SMART goals. As we talked about, these are a lot more effective, and they really will improve your chances of success. Also, don't forget about your personal goals. Take care of yourself as well, and make sure you schedule some personal time and recovery time. You can't just work 100% of the time. And I'd also encourage you to explore the resources available at DVC. We have a lot of career advisors, counselors. We have all the different interest areas that are available. So I'd encourage you to check out what's available in your area of interest. And these areas can also help you get started and map out your 5-year plan. So I'll go ahead and end it there. Again, these slides will be made available. And as Zaira said, we will have this recording posted later to the YouTube page. But if there are questions, you're welcome to send me a note at my DVC email address as well. And lastly, there are a few references. I did not come up with all this material myself, but I encourage you, if you're curious, if you want to see more information on some of this stuff, I've also included a list of various reading at the end of this slide. All right, well, so with that, let's go ahead and end here. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, please do fill out that survey from Zyra.